great as a leader, an educator, a father. And I know many of my colleagues feel the same, particularly Ms. Budges, Mr. Miller, Ms. Gallagher, and Ms. Mulvane. I think we run the gamut from angry to solemn, frustrated to hurt. As I said, this community that I've been serving for 16 years often feels more like my home community than when I go home to Issaquah. So we're continuing to work with Mercer Island Police Department as we speak. The abhorrent act of vandalism on January 1st that was discovered on January 2nd remains an active investigation. I'm confident that they will release the video and other visual evidence soon. We talked about it as early as today, but based on some new information, we're postponing that. But aside from the video and the individuals responsible, we hope the vandalism, as atrocious and painful as it is to see and read, can be used to promote conversation about rejecting hate. When school resumed Monday after winter break, we were disappointed and frustrated when swastikas were discovered in our very own bathrooms at Islander Middle School. With 26 years in public education, I wished I could say I was surprised. And I don't say this with being flippant, and it's not meant to diminish the seriousness at all. But I do know the developmental nature of young adolescents, particularly middle schoolers. I have a middle schooler at home myself, an 8th grader, and I know what stupid decisions that he makes, at least on a weekly basis, if not daily. However, it was at middle school where we received a student threat. Can you go back up, Ian? Several years ago, we were at the high school, and we faced some bomb threats, and we faced a series of them. But it wasn't the high school that we ended up evacuating. It was our middle school, following a copycat by one of our middle schoolers. And I'm afraid that again, and whether or not that student was acting out of ignorance, was acting to be funny, or was acting out of hate, what they did was wrong. And I believe they know it's wrong. Otherwise, they wouldn't have hid in a stall to do it. It's been my experience as well that students don't necessarily understand the gravity of the situation. They don't understand how painful images like a swastika are. We hope to teach them, and we spend a lot of time doing that. But no matter what their intention is, I want to be very clear with our community, with our students, our staff, our administrators, our parents. It hurts our students, it hurts our community, and we condemn it. We continue to be reflective and proactive. I was just down at the middle school today, meeting with Ms. Budges, talking about the many ways that we're already intervening. And clearly we have lots of work to do as a school, but also as a community. Principal Budges started this week with a morning announcement to everyone in the entire IMS community, condemning the swastikas and the hate speech that was left on the walls of their school over break. Then it was discovered later in the day that a swastika was in our very own bathroom. And so the staff came together. They had a stand-up staff meeting to review electronic hall pass norms so we can more closely monitor our halls. We added additional supervision this week down at IMS, and it will continue through next week to more closely monitor our bathrooms, our hallways, and to send a message to our students that we care about their safety and we are here for them. The administrators also prepared a video that was sent to all of the students on Wednesday. They came together again as a staff this morning to talk about more ways that we can show a collective commitment to stand up. And a lesson was put together by our social studies team at Islander Middle School about the history, the significance, and the pain of the symbol of a swastika, which the students participated in today. IMS last year had partnered with the Center for, or the Holocaust Center for Humanity and had in plans to do so again this spring, which they will do, but they also accelerated their conversation with the Director of Education at the center to begin that conversation in earnest. We have over 15 students already signed up to join a new group at Islander Middle School to stand up to 8. And it's been difficult, perhaps in the past, to have this number of students who join, but we've been able to garner, unfortunately, around this incident, interest in wanting to take back the school and what it stands for. And then at a community event last night, elected officials from our region, PTAs, educators, parents, students, and many others from Lake Washington School District, Issaquah School District, Bellevue School District, Renton, and us came together to send our legislators to Olympia with the message to fight for public education. And yet an invited guest chose to speak, who was chosen to speak about our broken funding model, took the opportunity to display a picture of a watermelon on his final slide. I've reached out to the individual, Dr. David Knight, and I've asked for an explanation. I want to know what his intentions were. And I want to apologize to anyone who is there in the audience who has seen the footage or the video or images of that slide. I get it. Some are going to argue that that's merely an expression of being pro-Palestine or peace. But to others, it's anti-Zionism and it's hate. We're facing a $3 million budget deficit in our school district alone. But instead of using that momentum from last night to propel us forward and figure out ways to make our schools bigger and better and brighter and more opportunities for students and to push back against funding, I spent our day talking about Dr. Knight and his unsolicited political statement. But yet, as awful as all of this is in the week, and everything that we're confronted and confronting, I'm also reminded of how amazing our students are, how talented our educators are, and how supportive our community is. Today, we announced that our 7th and 8th grade orchestra, I'm glad I didn't say anything, by the way, Ian, because I've known about this for weeks, and I'm glad I didn't spill the beans. I didn't realize it was such a secret. But today we announced that our 7th and 8th grade orchestra has been chosen to be a concert hour exemplary honor group for the 2025 National Association for Music Education's All Northwest Conference, which will be held in Spokane, February 13th to February 16th. They're one of just 2 middle schools chosen for this honor, and they will be performing on Saturday, February 15th. And we couldn't be more proud of the accomplishment. And we have to keep this in mind because those who want to express hate are going to continue to try to distract us. And we're going to stand up, push back, condemn, and be about our students and the education that we want to deliver. And so this is where I will awkwardly transition into our budget webinar. Because as we have seen across our region, wonderful experiences such as band, orchestra, choir, robotics, they're being cut in many of the districts in our state and our region. And no, I want to be clear tonight, I am not here as a superintendent with any announcement about cutting band, orchestra, or choir. I've been here 16 years. I know better than that. I wouldn't want to do that anyway. But I do want us to have an honest conversation tonight. I want us to be able to talk about the financial picture that's facing us, what we're doing proactively to be great stewards of your tax dollars, but what we're going to need from all of us. And so I want to welcome in my colleague and someone who has been at my side since I took over as superintendent, well, just afterwards. But that's Executive Director Matt Sullivan, who's going to join me tonight as we walk you through our budget. Come on, Matt. So we're going to just transition slides. Excellent. All right. Let's get started. So just our agenda for tonight of where we want to get going one back. So here we go. Can we go one back, please? There we go. Our agenda and what do we have in store for tonight? We want to talk a little bit about student enrollment, our biggest driver of revenue and source of funding from the state. Talk to you a little bit about school accounting and some reminders from some of our previous webinars. How schools are funded in the state of Washington, the financial cliffs and hurdles that we have ahead, things we've already done, the problems we face, the causes, some solutions we have, and some next steps. And as we were preparing for this right before the break and then into the break, Matt and I were chatting and we said, well, this is our third year doing this. In year one, we were like the canaries in the coal mine. We were, as you've often said, the bow wave. Other districts still buoyed up by the ESSER dollars. I think the full impacts of McCleary and where we are as schools across the state were masked. And I think it's uncovering, and we're going to talk about this, but we were really the ones just trying to be apologetic of how we got here and canaries in the coal mine. And then if I could read my writing from that meeting, year two, last year, I think we were here more in an advisory role. We were informing and updating you how we have paid back a loan and how we had really tried to take some steps forward. Tonight's message is really we're out of tricks. We have been using every budget, every funding source to its fullest extent. And I think we are here to say, being out of tricks, we're going to overcome this financial crisis. There is no doubt about that. We have talented people who are here, and we're going to fight too hard for kids, but we're going to need each other. So let's get started. So I'll talk a little bit about student enrollment. This chart here we've used before to a certain extent, highlighting the maroon color right up here. Kind of takes us 2017 clear up to last school year. And as you can see, we hit 3,881 students last school year, which is fantastic because it was projected at 3,880. Right. So we almost hit it perfectly. The bad news is it's kind of like if you take in $3,880 each month, but then you spend $3,880 each month, you're not putting anything into the bank. And so it is important to hit our projections, but the good news this year is the projection was 3,815, and we're at 3,900, which means we do have a buffer. And Matt's going to talk about why that's important in a second. And then lastly, down here is these are our projections from our demographers. We did the demographic study, and our board had us use two different firms, and you can see that they're showing a slight decline. But they also said we'd be here in this black line. And the great news is we're actually exceeding that, which is fantastic. So it's slight growth despite the projection, and we're going to continue to move in that direction as well. The second slide here for our enrollment is really to take a look at the K-12 enrollment this school year. We're looking at an average so far of 3,900 students enrolled. Now, I want to talk about this in two different ways. Actually, I'm going to have you. We look at student enrollment two different ways. It's important to understand the differences.
Yeah, some context. School districts measure enrollment two ways, as Dr. Rundle mentioned. One is by head count, or how many bodies attend Mercer Island schools. The second and more important is student FTE. FTE stands for full-time equivalent, or number of hours a student is in a classroom. And why FTE is important is because, well, we're funded via the state of Washington, OSPI, the Office of the Superintendent of Public Instruction, via our student FTE.
And so while we have 4,000 some odd students in the district, 3,900 FTE, the zero is our kindergartners. We have our kindergartners and our 12th graders in maroon to show those are the bookends. For a number of students who are graduating out, we're always paying attention to how many students are coming in. And we have a history on the island, and this is true in many districts where your kindergarten class tends to be a little bit or a lot smaller than your seniors. But that gap's gotten wider for us, and that's been one of the challenges, not just in our district, but all around the region and state, with declining birth rates, not replacing the large number of graduates. This kind of darker blue here, these are our transition years. We know a number of families choose private kindergarten options and then enroll into first grade. What's fantastic about this year is even with about 30 more students in first grade than kindergarten, our new kindergarten class who's coming in, they're actually larger than that first grade class, which gives us hope that we'll continue to grow. And we have a 5th and 6th grade transition, always looking for those natural transitions when families may choose to come back from private school or maybe move their families at that natural break. So you can see we are seeing that natural step up from 5th to 6th grade. And then the same is true in 8th and 9th grade. So enrollment's looking good. It's better than projected. We're going to continue working hard because I think there's a few different ways that we can think about enrollment. Yeah, we can go out and try to get more students, but we also know we need to keep the students here who have already chosen our school district. And so that's why we have nights like next week with our Future Islander Night coming up at the high school. We also have an event on Tuesday night, which is going to be a webinar with, I think, 6 to 8 former graduates who are now in college or chose a gap year. And they're going to be talking to our community about their experience. So we're going to continue to market. We think we've got absolutely the best K-12 system in the state, but we also know that that's not our only competition. We're also competing against our private schools. And our goal is all students are choosing Mercer Island schools. So this will be exciting. Quick reminder on school accounting. This is not my wheelhouse, so I step aside and give you the floor on this.
Next slide. Some context and maybe a little bit of education on how school districts account for the revenue that comes in and the expenditures that go out. We operate off 5 major funds. In common parlance, you can see this as your checking or savings account at home. Our largest and most vigorous is our general fund. This is where all of our personnel are paid out of, salaries, benefits, etc. But also something called MSOC, which stands for Materials, Supplies, and Operating Costs. This is classroom supplies, to copy paper, to our utilities, water, sewer, garbage, etc. Second fund is our transportation fund. Fairly self-explanatory. This is where we purchase our smaller and big yellow buses out of. Third fund is our debt service fund. In 2014, the island so graciously passed an almost $100 million bond. With that, taxes are collected via King County, deposited in this fund, and then over the course of almost 15 years, we pay off those bond payments through this fund. Fourth fund, Capital Projects Fund. Every 6 years or so, once again, the island graciously approves our Cap Tech levy. This funds everything from software to hardware to things like new carpeting in our older schools this past summer. And then finally, our ASB fund, Associated Student Body. And a couple ways to learn or know this fund is student-raised money for student-raised activities, and or the term CARS, an acronym for cultural, athletic, recreational, or social. And those are our 5 major funds. If we look a little more granular, at last year's 23-24, where do the expenditures go towards in our general fund? Well, if you see, almost 83% of all expenditures went to personnel, salaries, and benefits. Specifically, certified, 44.5%. These pays for our amazing teachers across our district. We also have salaries classified at 18%. This is everything from our custodians to our bus drivers to our maintenance and operation team members. And then we also have benefits
and paraeducators. You can tell he's the executive director of maintenance operations and transportation. No.
And then our benefits, vision, dental, medical, and retirement at 20%. And then the others, such as supplies and materials, purchase services, such as our wonderful contracted food service teams through Chartwells, staff travel for trainings, and then some minor capital purchases.
So as we take a look and kind of have reset of where we are from that financial picture, I want to talk a little bit about how we're approaching, which some are describing as a financial crisis, a hurdle. For us, it's a big challenge. We know we need to unpack this, we need to plan for it, and we need to build something that's sustainable. And so as we think about, what is the problem? What are those causes? What are some solutions? And then what are the results that we're after? So let's start with the problem. Just bluntly, I'll just direct you down. I shared this a little bit briefly, but we're $3 million short. If we receive no new revenue at all, as we head into the next school year, so not this school year, we're fine this school year, but as we head into 25-26, all things being equal, without any additional enhancements, we project that we'll be about $3 million short. And let's talk a little bit more about what that means and how that comes to be. So next slide. So what we've done to attempt and avoid this shortfall, I'm going to brag a little bit about Matt and their team, our team, I should say. But we have members of Matt's team who come from Vashon Island, Bremerton. They come from Kent. They come from Renton, because they want to be here, and they could be in any district, I guarantee, around this state. And we've been fortunate enough to maintain and retain Jackie on the staff, but we brought in 4 new people over the last 3 years or 2 years. And we've been doing a lot. So give us an idea of what we've been doing to mitigate.
Absolutely. Accurate and conservative student enrollment projections. As Fred had mentioned earlier, we contracted with 2 different demographers that helps us plan years ahead to see if there's an increase or decrease, hence how do we project our budget. Sadly, there's reductions in staffing and reductions in material supplies and operating costs. We just have to meet the shortfall coming from the state. We're always committed to efficiency across the board, in the past, presently, and in the future, such as limits to travel and spending where and when we can. Come February, we're limiting out-of-state travel as one option. We also have a wonderful partnership with MIEA, the Mercer Island Education Association, who's been right there with us hand in hand as we move forward during these budget crunches. And then lastly, strategic budgeting and accounting practices. Every year, we're audited by the Washington State auditors, and thankfully, we've always had clean audits, at least in my tenure and Fred's tenure. So it's good, a silver lining, if you will.
Is it unique to us?
It is not unique to us at all. There is a record number of districts in binding condition, meaning the state is taking over their finances because they cannot or have failed to do so, and or they're being closely monitored, whether that be the local educational service district or, once again, OSPI. Apportionment advancements. Apportionment is money we receive on a monthly basis from the state, and now more districts we're seeing are asking for their money way in advance, kind of like a payday loan, if you will. Underfund loans are fairly self-explanatory. We talked about those 5 funds. They'll take money from the Cap Tech projects to pay bills in the general fund, etc.
Which we had to do,
correct,
3 years ago, 3 springs ago, and we did that. We successfully paid it back within the year, but that's one of those tricks that we're talking about of you can't live on those, and we definitely never want to be in that situation again.
And thankfully, over the last 2.5 years, we've had no deficit spending, meaning we haven't dug into our fund balance, our savings account, if you will. And then ESSER.
Sure.
Yeah.
Just the ESSER dollars from COVID, I think we really feel like that delayed the fallout that we're seeing across the region and the state. All of that money that came in related to Title I funding for those districts that receive a large amount, they really received into the tens of millions.
Correct.
Versus us, we received just over $1 million.
Just over $1 million.
So we didn't have any real ESSER money to begin with. And so that's why I go back to, I think 3 years or 2 years ago, we were here being the canaries of the coal mine, warning everyone that this is coming. And now it's here.
Correct. And then student enrollment uncertainty, hence once again, we see other districts that are losing drastic numbers of students. We are not in that case, but we've also worked with demographers to chart a path forward so we understand if there's increases and or decreases and can budget accordingly.
So taking a look at the financial cliffs ahead, and so let's take a look at some of the causes. This chart here, just taking a quick look, a number of districts from around the state are using something similar. And what we're trying to show the legislature is that, as we said, this isn't a problem unique to Mercer Island. It's big districts, it's small districts, it's rural, it's urban, it's high numbers of Title I, low numbers of Title I. Irrespective, when you break it down, it's really simple. There are three areas that we desperately need better support from our school legislatures. We grew fund balance by nearly 4% in the last 2 years, certainly not as much last year as the first year that we were together. But the state's not fulfilling its paramount duty. In the state constitution, it says that public education is the paramount duty of the state. And that state budget has actually regressed since 2018, when we hit a high water mark of investing about half of the state budget into public ed. And now we're down to around 43%. Where is that shortfall? It's in three places. One, it's in special education. Over the course of the last several years, we're underfunded $16 million in special education. Last year, it was $4.6 million. This year, we're projecting 3.9. Where else does it show up? Matt talked about material supplies and operating costs. Insurance is up 137% for us over the last 4 years. Our costs are hitting us just like they are you at the gas pump, at the grocery store, and others. Our commodity costs are going up too. Our shortage this year, we're projecting, would be $2.1 million just in the operating costs to run our district. And then one that wasn't such a big challenge for us, but has grown, is transportation. Several years ago, we were about $300,000 short on transportation. We're projecting to be about $1 million short. I shared last night at that event that Mr. Gertis, our transportation assistant director of transportation, he shared our buses travel 1,100 miles every single day around this 17-mile circumference island. Well, the problem is the state funds 2/3 of that. We fund the other third. So the first $700 are on the state, and the next 350 or 400 are on us. And where do we find that? Our levy, basic ed. The things that we should be spending on our students in the classrooms, we're having to spend that money just to get our kids to school and home. So again, it doesn't matter if what your demographics are in your district. Everyone's got to get their kids to and from school, and the state isn't picking that up.
So we mentioned post-McCleary and what happened. When 2020 or 2012, the state Supreme Court ruled that the state of Washington, the legislature, had failed in its paramount duty to fully fund basic education. So what we're going to see in this slide, the next one, if you take a look at the purple and the blue and the purple and the blue, you see in 2017, state schools accounted for about 25% of your local taxes. And then locally, Mercer Island School District was about 30%. With that ruling at the state level, you see the difference. The purple here is now at 36%, meaning the state, in all of their wisdom, decided to pull more taxes at the state level. And then in turn, they capped the local levy, the EP&O, the Educational Programs and Operational Levy, at, for us, around $12 million per year. So next slide. Here's a different way of looking at it. We kind of combined all the other taxes that you pay. And if you can just take a look at the purple to purple, blue to blue. Purple meaning the state school tax, 2017 to 2024. And then the blue meaning our local taxes, our Cap Tech levy and our EP&O levy, 2017 to 2024. So historical perspective and really putting out some dollars as opposed to percentage of the pie of your taxes. In 2017, 2018, we, Mercer Island School District, collected almost $16 million in that EP&O levy. And then the state capped it, hurting our district drastically. If you escalate that at about 2% per year, 2023, 24, you see about $17.8 million we should have received, which we don't anymore. And in 23, 24, we were only allowed to collect $12 million straight across. In totality, a loss of almost $6 million just this year or just last year. Think of that being compounded over how many years?
And to illustrate just another way, I was just thinking about this today. Can you go back one slide? So if you think about that $6 million, the problem is this percentage of the pie is not coming back to the district proportionately. So more money is going out, and we totally get that. That is about public ed. It is about funding for the good of the whole. The problem is that $6 million deficit now is closed here, and we're not getting it back. And so that's creating some of the pressure as well.
And also something I thought of, we lose local control. Because of that cap, that money disappears, goes to the state, goes elsewhere. We have no say in where that money goes.
Next slide.
And next slide. There we go.
So if we take a look and dig a little deeper into what we were just discussing, you know, the soaring costs of our programs, our services, these are things that the levy used to cover when we were collecting $6 million, which would be nearly 18 million now. The 7-period day at the high school, that $1.2 million, that's what the levy was covering. Maintaining 4 elementary schools. We know that there's an overhead of about $800,000 annually on each of the schools. That's what a levy is for. Our band, our orchestra, and our choir program, which we have not had to charge for our 5th graders, that's what a levy's for. Our 6th through 12th grade athletic opportunities, talking to our athletic director, Lindsay Blaine, this is actually a stat, she could probably update it and give me even better info. But I asked her last year, I said, you know, compare Mercer Island to other schools or districts in and around our region. You know, how many, you know, athletic teams are we fielding compared to others? And I think she only came up with 2 or 3 4A schools who have more teams than we do competing as a 3A district. Why? We had an EP&O levy. The problem is, as we described, with that EP&O levy pretty much capped or is capped, those high expectations that we have and we should have are being squeezed. And so we've got to think about new ways that we're going to be able to overcome this, because I know there are districts in and around our area that are starting to go back to a 6-period day. As I said, band, orchestra, choir, those things are being cut in school districts. We're seeing closures of schools. We're not here tonight saying that that's going to happen to us. We are here to say we're going to need to do some things differently, and we're going to need your help with that along the way. So our financial cliffs and some of our solutions, we can go one more. You know, one way that we can think about this is we can think about enrollment, and we talked about enrollment being a big driver, but we have to attract and retain students. We've got to continue to do outreach and continue to use choice transfer. Now, open enrollment, we've had conversations about this, and I'll be making a recommendation to the board next week around what open enrollment should look like. It's not going to solve all of our problems, and it's not intended to. It's meant to smooth out the challenges that we have. But the big work is, how do we get students to want to choose Mercer Island, who live here, and then stay here once they're here? Another solution that we know we have are student fees. And we've been fortunate that we've tried to keep our fees as low as possible. But those costs for athletics and clubs, extracurriculars, our ASB, credit card transactions, I think we're only collecting half of the fee right now. I do have to be honest, and I've talked to PTAs and foundation and boosters, our advisory councils, that we have to look at raising fees starting next year. And we're not going to put it all on the backs of our families. That's not what this is about, but we've got to find ways to move levers in different ways. We'll have lots more information, including booster club summits and others throughout the spring. We don't want to surprise everyone, but we also want to be upfront and honest. A couple other solutions that we're talking about, you know, one is the painful process of staff reductions. We've reduced staff in our schools. We've had to reduce FTE. We know our librarians at our elementaries are not full-time any longer. We don't have associate principals in our elementaries any longer. We haven't replaced an associate principal at the high school, and there's many other examples. So we want to try to avoid cutting out of the core classroom and keep the cuts as far away as possible. But we also have to make sure that we are matching our enrollment with our staffing. So we'll continue that painful process throughout the spring as we head forward, trying to be as careful and precise as possible. And lastly, with legislative action, and that's what last night was about, and it's going to continue. A number of us will be down in SeaTac this weekend at a legislative conference, really talking about what is the legislative platform. We need more funding in special education. We need more transportation. We need more in our material supplies and our operating costs. The legislative platform is simple. We need a fully funded education. And those are the three areas that we want to do that. So let's broadcast our voices down in Olympia. Let's minimize those impacts locally and all work together as we pull on a number of levers, because there isn't one lever that's going to solve all of this. It's going to take everything. So I want to bring in Mar Breton. She is a tremendous advocate for our schools and our school district. Mar has been working this year as our legislative advocate for the PTA, working at the state level and the local level, working last night to build partnerships and bridges. And she's going to talk a little bit about what our PTAs are doing to help support as well. Next slide as we bring Mara.
Great. Thank you so much. Let me know if you can't hear me. But I am so grateful as I've been on advocacy with the Mercer Island PTA Council, and have really gotten to watch the district struggle with this and make very wise decisions and do the best they can. So first of all, I'm grateful to the district for all they're doing to help us through a difficult time and a difficult crisis, and to keep us from crisis, really. They're doing a great job to figure out how to address the shortfall from the state, which is really where the problem is. So thank you. I wanted to give you some things you can do as parents so that we don't walk away from this presentation feeling like, oh my gosh, I feel powerless, because there is actually a lot we can do as parents. There's a lot we've been doing as the PTA. We met with legislators. We would love to have you. If you want to come meet with your legislators, you're welcome to reach out to your advocacy chair and join future meetings. We also have a letter. So you'll see there's a QR code right here. If you're watching on your computer, and you can just pick up your phone and get that QR code, you're welcome to sign onto a letter that we have for legislators asking them to prioritize school funding. As Fred mentioned, they have deprioritized school funding, and as a share of the general budget, it's been shrinking. So we certainly want to see the state put at least 50% of the state budget towards school funding. So you can sign on to that letter. If you can't get to that QR code, there are a couple other things. There are a couple other ways to get to this letter. So we have it on the PTA Council website. So if you just Google Mercer Island PTA Council, it is right on our homepage where you can sign that letter. I've also been posting it on Mercer Island Neighbors and Mercer Island Parents, so you can find it on Facebook. And then we're going to be sending out an email next week, again, asking parents who have not signed on to this letter to please sign on. And this will go to our legislators, and then I'll also be creating a letter to the governor with all of the signatures. So the next thing that you can do is sign up for Washington State PTA Action Alerts. Our state PTA is very involved in legislative advocacy, working with legislators across the state. So they will be sending out action alerts on legislative action that's coming up. Session starts this coming week. And so those action alerts will go through the end of session in a few months. And then again, if you want to get involved in advocacy, we'd love to have you. And we would love to get you involved in whatever way you'd like to. If you'd like to just call your legislators, tell them you're concerned. The language that we've been advised by our wonderful legislators who do prioritize education funding, but they keep asking us to just tell them, to keep telling legislators, this is your top priority. This is the paramount duty of the state of Washington. It's in our Constitution, is to fund basic education. So that is our messaging, and we just are going to ask that over and over again and let them figure out how to do it. Well, thank you. That's really all I had to say. Thanks to everyone for all your help, and all the PTA has been involved in the big event last night, and appreciate all the help you've been giving.
And Mar, thank you. Can't do any of this work without our partners in WASDA and WASA, but PTA certainly, and all the work that you've done already. And I know we've got a legislative session that's a long session that's just getting started, and we'll have plenty more, but just want to thank you for all of your service up to this point. I think we're further ahead right now as a district than we've ever been in terms of our advocacy.
Mhm.
So one of the questions that came up so far, and if there are others, feel free to put those into the chat, but it was the question kind of back to, what do the insurance costs look like for us and what's causing that? I think it was Issaquah last night that quoted that theirs have gone up 150%, and ours is 137%. I want to talk a little bit about what's causing that.
Many things are causing it external to our control, but a lot of liability that goes on within the districts is causing that to happen across the board. Number wise, in 18-19, I believe we were paying about $478,000 a year, and now this year we're about 1.1 million. So we are having very, very clean claims, minimal across the board in comparison to other districts around us. But as the pool goes, we go too.
And a couple of other figures just to kind of throw out there. Our school district tends to hire and retain very experienced and well-qualified staff. And if we just look at teachers alone, the state provides us with about, I think $123,000 or so per teacher for their benefits and their pay. The average teacher in Mercer Island with benefits, retirement, and pay is $147,000. So for every single teacher that the state chooses to fund, they're already underfunding it. And then I need to back up again and remind everyone that of all of our teachers, they only pay for about 80% of those teachers. So there's another 20% that we pay for. And if we step back even further, the state's only paying for about 65% of our staff. We pay for the rest. And when I say we, we're back to that levy. We're back to reallocating basic ed dollars. We're back to grading funds together. We're back to our PTAs, our foundation, for things that should really be paid for by the state. Any other questions coming up?
Can you just remind them they can go to the Q&A to ask questions? It's a square, a circle, and a triangle.
The square, thank you, Andres. The square, the circle, and the triangle on your bottom right. That is where you can go to put in your questions if you have any. We're going to hang tight for just a second to see if any others come in. As we're doing that, we certainly want to thank you for being here tonight and joining us. We are recording and we'll make this available on our website and push it out through social media and other ways. Also, it's a good reminder, this isn't your only chance to be able to connect with us. Feel free to email us, come to board meetings with public comment or to hear more tuning in, but we're here to serve this community. And if you have budget questions or concerns or just general thoughts, we're here to engage with you as we go along. So another question is the school district and board considering, I just lost it, sorry. Is the school district and board considering tapering the top-heavy surplus of admins at the middle and high school? Also, what percentage of the administrator salaries comprise the district budget? Can we reduce this? Great question. Let me talk a little bit about that. At the high school, we're actually running the high school with one fewer administrator. When the previous principal resigned, we hired Mr. Wold. We chose not to backfill. So the high school is actually running one administrator down. We have Lindsay Blaine as an athletic director. As I said, as a 3-day school, we're running more athletic teams than many 4A schools. And so we're already down an administrator there. The middle school, Mr. Miller is half-time at the middle school this year because he's half-time in our HR department, and he'll be transitioning permanently to HR next year. And so the actual added FTE that we have down there will not be backfilled. It's just really to bridge this school year. We already didn't bring back associate principals. We had to eliminate associate principals at our elementary several years ago. And then when I was hired as superintendent, we did not backfill my role then as deputy superintendent or assistant superintendent. So we're running without any of those positions right now. So I would say that's not necessarily a board responsibility. They delegate that to me to be able to organize the leadership structure however we can. And again, we're trying to put as much back into the schools We certainly need administrators to keep things going, but those are some ways that we've already tried along the way. As far as the percentages, I don't think we have those off the top of our head. It's actually a lot smaller than people oftentimes think in terms of percent of the total budget. But if you want to send that question in via email, we can get back to you on that. What are the part-time enrollment numbers and how much funding is the district not receiving due to students at MIHS part-time enrolling at Privet? If the district provided a more effective math and science program at MIHS, bring back students from Privet, how much funding would come back? I don't have those numbers off the top. I had just met with Carol Meyer from Privet right before the break to talk about that partnership. It's important to remember that if a student goes to Privet for one class period, that is just, if they are a 7-period student, they're still 6 periods, which means the state still funds us fully for that student. So it's only if that student's going for fewer than 6 periods in any one of our schools that we're actually losing funding. But it's also important to remember that if we've lost that funding, that means we're just not hiring those teachers for that class. So it's not necessarily an apples to apples type of comparison. And I know that there's been similar questions at the PTA table here and there. And, you know, we continue to try to, as I said, make sure we have as many students as possible sticking in our schools, but they also choose for many different reasons. Some want small class sizes and different environments. So I think the question gets a little bit about maybe that our teachers aren't doing a good enough job. And I think I'll push back on some of that to say, I think we're doing a lot, especially with the funding that we're getting. And when you're only getting 2/3 of what you need, I think we're pushing pretty hard on that. Next one, if the state is constitutionally required to fund the school districts at a certain level, is there legal avenues being pursued to secure funding? I'll start with a reminder and then I'm going to kick it over to you. That's what that lawsuit was about, the McCleary lawsuit in 2012. It took clear until 2018 to actually solve. And when we saw the money coming in, but what are we hearing now about lawsuits?
There is the rumors of a McCleary 2 out there, but nothing solid or concrete at this point. I think they're waiting to see what this biennium legislative session will produce in that beginning.
Any others coming in? It sounds like advocacy efforts are focused on the state fully funding education. Are there or should there be advocacy efforts focused on increasing or removing the $12 million limit on the local funding with the EPNO?
Yes, there are numerous bills in Olympia that there are at least in the nascent stages that will remove the cap or increase the cap for all districts. And we'll see how that transpires. The legislative session starts next week, the 13th.
And a quick reminder on that, let's say the legislature does lift that cap and we can raise more. We'll actually kind of hit that in stride because next February, our EPNO levy will come up for election again. And so we can't arbitrarily, even if the legislature were to remove the cap, we can't arbitrarily then just start collecting more taxes. That has to be approved by the voters. But a year from this February, we will be coming back out to the voters to renew the EPNO levy. If it's raised at that time, then we'll be able to ask our voters for more at that point. What's the largest cost bucket the district has, and what are the plans to cut that by 10 to 15%?
That's our personnel is our largest cost bucket. I think I mentioned that in regard to our general fund. It accounts for almost 83% of our expenditures. And as we move forward, we are looking at staffing reductions.
We're also looking at reductions on our material supplies and operating costs. Andres, who's in the room tonight, has been working on crunching numbers all the way down to paper and copiers and leases. And while it might only save 10,000 here or 15,000 there, it all adds up. And so just a reminder, yes, staffing is one area to look for. 2 is legislative support and relief. 3 is raising some of our fees to fully collect on things that we haven't necessarily collected on before. And then, you know, lastly is trying to be good stewards and doing the best we can with the dollars we have. Great question. Are teachers in MISD being paid the same as surrounding East Side districts, and if not, why? Really complicated, but great question. Yes and no. It depends on who you compare to. Comparing on any salaries can be challenging because it's not always just the stated salary schedule in a contract. There are lots of ways that we try to incentivize and provide funding or to provide pay to our educators. We have supplementals. We have extra supplementals that are tied to the base salary. And so I would say right now, we're not as competitive as we once were. And I would be remiss not to look right in the camera to our educators, both classified and certified, because it hasn't been lost on me that they actually took less than IPD, which is kind of the cost of living the last 2 years, to try to help us to claw back. Where we don't want to be is in binding condition, where OSPI comes in and they take over our finances. And so at the bargaining table, we've worked really hard, and it's meant that we have had to take less, and our administrators have taken less. And it's all so that we can continue to provide the very best and not have to go through those reductions. We do, in our current agreement, have an IPD plus 1% coming up next year and in the following year to try to catch back up. I suspect we're going to see a lot of districts, and we are already seeing some back at the negotiating table because they can't afford some of their contracts. And it's not because they didn't want to or that they made bad decisions at the time. They made the best decision with the information they had. But I do want to thank Mercer Educational Association, our board, all of the bargaining teams who work so hard to try to get the very best contract possible while not reducing the classroom experience. Why continue to spend on yonder pouches? Is that an effective use of dollars when middle schoolers still have access to iPads, for example? You know, this is a great question that we're continuing to go through. I will still stand by the decision that putting that yonder pouch, even if it's not being used as it's intended 100% of the time, that visual reminder of what that phone does to students, distractions in the classroom, mental health, whatever those are, I think it's made a big difference. And when we talk to our educators and we talk to even our students and our superintendent student advisory, far more students are in support of this than against. Yes, it was an expense and it came out of the cap tech levy. And that's one of, you know, that's that side, a bucket of money that's different than the general fund. That's not something the state's coming up with. But I think it's really important. And the iPad doesn't have that same functionality as their personal devices. So I get where the question's coming from, but I'm still standing firm that it wasn't about phones. It's really about the learning experience for our students. And I think it's gotten better. And for that, I'll stand by it all day long. Have you identified the root causes of parents opting to send kids off island to private schools? There's several of them. If you go back to our December board meeting, we gave a presentation about this every year in December. Our board asks for this information. So every family who leaves the district, we do send a survey to. We also have amazing registrars who on the way out the door try to get as much information from families. One thing that we've heard consistently over the years about why a family might choose a different experience is class size. Oftentimes in private schools or other opportunities, there are smaller class sizes. That's a really challenging piece for us to compete against, as you see with funding. Another one is academic rigor. Some families feeling like it's too rigorous and others saying we're not rigorous enough. And that's another piece that we hear. We've also heard about initiatives in public ed around diversity, equity, and inclusion, and that being a deterrent for some families, that there's too much focus on other things other than academic rigor. But back on the December board meeting, or I see it's an anonymous, or no, it's a question. I'll try to look this community member up. I can shoot you a link so that you can see the full board report. Excellent. So with that, I just want to thank everyone again. It's been a really challenging start to 2025, but I don't think that has to put a cloud on all of 2025. We've got some amazing students, as we illustrated with our orchestra down at the middle school. And that's just one group of so many who are doing great things. And they're doing great things because you're sending us great kids. And we've got educators here to embrace them, to work together. And we're going to take the challenge of a deficit that we're facing head on. And we'll continue to work trying to keep those impacts as far away from kids as possible. So have a great night. Thanks for tuning in. And again, this will be recorded as well. Take care.